Okay, now that we have this turned over, we're going to pull out the motherboard because it's loose from the chassis. Best way to do it is to do it maybe from the GPU and just lightly or carefully pull it out without cutting yourself, without ruining anything in the unit. Okay, this goes off to the side carefully, and now we're ready to work with our next phase. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out these two X's on the back. These are the two X's that hold the GPU and the CPU. This is not an easy thing to do. Again, I already started my work, but you don't want to scratch the motherboard. You don't want to touch the motherboard as much as possible. Practically, it takes a very steady hand, but I was able to get out this one. It pops right up if you do it right. I'm using a hook. Some people use a screwdriver. I'm using a hook. I thought that was the best way to maybe pull it up. So the first one actually I got off. That came off. I'm going to try to show you with the second one. Again, it's very tricky, but the way I did it was I put it in this way from the outside going in, and very carefully try to move it so that you can not touch the motherboard. Don't be aggressive. It'll pop right out. And then if you do another one, the other two could potentially just come loose. You may have to play with the third one just a little bit, but it'll pop right out. So I'm going to go ahead and finish my work here and come back. Okay, I went ahead and finished my work, and voila, it's out. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over, and when you do that, the heat sinks are going to come off. And that's what you were trying to get at, the heat sinks. And on this heat sink there's residue here, and on this heat sink there's also a lot of residue. And that residue we're going to clean off, as well as the two chips. Okay, for time purposes, the next thing you have to do is take out these bolts that we're holding with the X's that you took out. You have to take them out of the heat sink, and there's 4 on each one. So what we did was we used the plies, or you can use the proper, tool to do it. And then once you get it loose, you can just unscrew them. And you do the same for this. And this one there was 1, 2, 3, 4, and with this one there was 1, 2, 3, 4. And once you take them out, you're pretty much good to go to the next step, which is going to be taking the GPU and the CPU and cleaning those to a complete shine. And when we come back, we should see what that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Okay, we've done quite a bit of work here. To save some time, we are going to show you the finished product. As you can see, the CPU and the GPU have been thoroughly cleaned. All that paste that was hanging out around the chip and on top of the chip has been thoroughly cleaned. We used a solution to do that, and my lovely assistant, who happens to be my wife, was the one who did it, and she did a beautiful job. And with that, we also had her clean the two heat sinks. See, they're thoroughly cleaned. All the residue is off this one, and all the residue is off this one. Again, my lovely assistant, my wife, did a remarkable job with that. The other thing I worked on while we were away is I worked on the screws, because we're going to need screws. We're not going to use those X clamps any longer. We're going to use a screw with a metal washer and a nylon washer, and then once we put in the heat sink, because these are going to screw into each of these, the two heat sinks. One's going to screw there, one's going to screw there, and so you need 8 screws, 8 metal washers, and 8 nylon washers. And then another 8 for the opposite side, because once you screw it through, you're going to put them through the bottom before you screw it in. And we'll show you that too, but anyway, we need the screws. So now we're going to take a break. We're going to go to the next part of the project, which is now putting the Arctic silver onto each one of the chips. Now, when you do that, you're going to put it on the CPU here, you're going to put it on the graphic GPU here and also here. You can apply it to all those, and we'll show you that when we're done. Okay, here we go. What we have done is we put the heat sinks back. We've put the motherboard back in the case. We've added the front board in so that we could turn this baby on. I've hooked back up the DVD, and I've hooked up the fan and have the fan laying over the DVD and the CPU with the fan labels facing down. Important thing. I also plug back in my 2 cables. I'm going to plug this thing in, and then we're going to turn it on and wait and see what happens. Apparently we're going to hope that we see 2 flashing lights by the time this thing finishes. Okay, moment of truth here. I'm going to turn this thing on. It's plugged in. Okay, starting up. We got a green light. There's our 3 flashing lights, which is what we expected to see. And now what's going to happen is, over time, and they're telling me 20 minutes, this should become 2, which means that the boards are, or the thing is rather heated. So,
I already did it.
So, do I turn it off?
Yeah.
I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to take out my plug. I'm going to reassemble this whole thing, and then we'll come back, start it up, and let's see if it actually plays a game. Okay, one thing to note when I'm putting on the cover, you got to put the cover on before you actually put this eject button back in over here. This goes in actually now. And then the other thing about the cover is when you put it back on, there's metal skeleton on the underneath this plastic. You gotta make the metal skeleton be on the outside of the Xbox, so it's actually hanging off, because at first it looked like it went on the inside, but it doesn't. It goes and hangs off on the outside, and then you get a perfect lining match. And then once that's on, then you put on the eject, and that's gonna stick in there. I'm gonna put that in now, and then I'm gonna start screwing the bottom. Okay, now before I put the bottom cover on, I turned it over and I'm putting these 8 screws, the big screws in. So that's 2 right here. Here's 3. Here's 4. Oh. Here's 5. There's actually 6, not 8. 6 big screws. Okay. Alright, now we're going to put this cover on. Wow, that was like the easiest part of the whole project right here. Well, unbelievable. Okay, here we go. I'm going to go ahead and power this baby up and see what happens. I did test it before I put the covers on, and there you have it. That's a pretty scene to see. Let's see how a game works. The CD-ROM works good. Now again, it helps to test pretty much your Xbox to see that it goes on with a green light prior to putting the casing back on, because you might have to just retrack your steps in terms of what you did when you were first working on the chips. So that is a possibility. Don't rule it out, but make sure everything's working, and then put the white casing and the hard drive back in. It's looking good. I like that. Well, this is Indiana Tech Jones. I would like to thank my lovely assistant, who happens to be my wife. Another job well done.